The bulldozer's first pass took the porch. Raina stood at the edge of the gravel drive, holding a coffee mug that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. And she did not put it down. Her mother had positioned herself near the excavator, phone raised, narrating for whoever was watching later. Her father stood a few feet back, arms crossed, saying nothing, which was its own kind of statement. Her brother Colt wasn't there. He rarely was for the parts that required standing in the sun. "It's your brother's land now, loser," her mother said, not looking away from the screen. "Go rent a room." The crew operating the machinery didn't look up. To them, this was a Tuesday. To Raina's family, it was theater, and they'd been rehearsing this particular scene for longer than the house had existed. She had bought the lot 6 years ago, quietly, during a period when nobody in her family was paying attention to her decisions, because nothing about her life seemed worth commenting on yet. It backed onto a stretch of marshland she used to walk as a teenager, back when walking there was the only way to be alone. She never explained to her parents why she chose that particular parcel over 3 others the realtor showed her. She'd learned by then that explaining herself to people who'd already decided who she was rarely changed anything. It just gave them more material. The porch became a shape on the ground, then the east wall. Her mother laughed at something, maybe the way the roofline folded, maybe nothing at all, and kept filming. Raina didn't cry. She'd expected herself to, in some vague future version of this moment she hadn't known she was rehearsing for. Instead, she felt something quieter, more like watching weather happen to a place she used to live, rather than a place she still did. 2 years earlier, a county surveyor had knocked on her door about a boundary dispute filing. Not from her family, from a neighboring parcel, and in walking the property line with her, he'd mentioned, almost as an aside, that the back third of her land fell inside a buffer zone tied to the wetland reserve system. Protected. Federally protected specifically, because the marsh fed into a watershed with an endangered salamander population nobody but a handful of biologists had ever cared about. She hadn't told her family. There'd been no reason to. The demolition threats had circulated for years at that point. "Colt gets the land. You're an afterthought. Dad said he'd have it torn down before he'd let you keep something." Colt didn't get, and she'd stopped registering them as anything but background noise, the kind of cruelty that repeats so often it loses its edge and becomes furniture. She never imagined they'd actually do it. Threatening was the sport. Following through required a kind of commitment her family hadn't shown for much else. Watching the west wall go, she understood she'd misjudged that. She didn't call a lawyer first. She called Marcus Feld, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife contact who'd been CC'd on the original buffer zone correspondence. It was not a dramatic call. She stood a little apart from the wreckage, phone against her ear, and gave him the parcel number, the date, and what she was watching happen in real time. He asked if there were still crew on site. She said yes. He said don't do anything, don't confront anyone, just document what you can and stay clear of the machinery. She hung up and finished her coffee, cold as it was, because it seemed important to finish something. Nothing happened that afternoon. No sirens, no dramatic intervention mid-demolition. Nothing to satisfy an audience expecting the story to resolve itself before dinner. The crew finished the job. What had been a house became a flattened lot with exposed foundation lines, and her mother posted the video with a caption about consequences and knowing your place. The stop work order came 4 days later, and by then there was nothing left to stop. What arrived instead was an assessment team, 2 biologists and a compliance officer from the regional office, walking the disturbed ground with equipment Raina didn't recognize, taking soil samples near the marsh edge, where runoff from the demolition debris had already begun to shift the water table's turbidity. Nobody filmed this. Her mother wasn't there to narrate it. It happened the way most consequences happen, administratively, without spectacle, weeks stacking into a formal notice that named a dollar figure large enough that her father called her for the first time in 11 months, his voice flat with a fear that hadn't fully translated into remorse yet. She heard about the final number, 5 million, structured across habitat restoration costs, statutory penalties, and remediation. Not from either parent, but from a cousin's text with too many exclamation points, as if this were still entertainment and not the slow unwinding of a debt her family had no plan for. She sat with that news the way she'd sat with the coffee mug, not celebrating, not composing a response. There was a version of this where she felt vindicated, clean, restored. She kept waiting for that version to arrive, and it didn't. What she felt instead was tired in a specific way. The tiredness of realizing the fight had never really been about the land, and that winning didn't undo the years spent absorbing the joke at family gatherings, smiling because smiling had been easier than accounting for it. Her mother called 9 days after the fine was finalized. Not to apologize, Raina understood by the second sentence that apology wasn't the purpose of the call, but to ask carefully whether Raina might be willing to help. Alone, her mother said. Or just a conversation with whoever needed to hear it, since Raina clearly had connections now. Raina sat with the phone against her ear the same way she had at the demolition. Quiet, unhurried, watching the ordinary evening light come through her rental window. I'll think about it, she said. She meant it literally. Not as a door closing, not as a door left open out of weakness. Just an honest, unresolved sentence from someone who no longer felt obligated to perform forgiveness she didn't have ready yet, and wasn't certain she ever would. She hung up before her mother could fill the silence with anything else. And she did not feel triumphant. She felt like someone standing on a boundary line that had, for once, held.